It was on this day in 1949 that representatives of 12 allies, including Canada's Lester B. Pearson, came together in Washington to sign the treaty that created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So the significance of today, April 4th, is not lost on me, and it's been my absolute privilege to meet with Jens today on Parliament Hill. Cet après-midi, nous nous sommes entretenus sur le rôle que joue le Canada au sein de l'OTAN et de son engagement de longue date auprès de cette alliance importante. Nous avons également discuté de la façon dont l'OTAN s'adapte aux défis d'aujourd'hui en matière de sécurité, y compris du besoin de faire avancer le programme sur les femmes, la paix et la sécurité. Et comme nos partenaires le savent, le Canada répondra toujours à l'appel de l'Alliance. Aujourd'hui, le Canada lance une campagne médiatique intitulée « Nous sommes l'OTAN » et ajoute sa voix à celle de nos alliés qui ont lancé des campagnes semblables au cours de la dernière année. Cette nouvelle initiative a pour but de montrer aux Canadiens ce que fait le Canada pour l'Alliance et ce que fait l'OTAN pour la sécurité de notre pays. Recent political instability, civil unrest, and threats to democracy remind us of why NATO matters in the 21st century. Not only is Canada an unwavering member of this alliance, we are also active, from our leadership in NATO's multinational battle group in Latvia and helping patrol the skies in the North Atlantic in Iceland, to partnering in Iraq to help build local capacity and denouncing Russian aggression in all its forms. Working in unison to promote peace and security, member nations know that we are indeed stronger together. We share much more than an ocean. We share a vision of what our world can and should be, a place of cooperation and mutual respect. The rule of law, democracy, security. These are principles worth fighting for. Notre partenariat transatlantique nous tiendra toujours côte à côte pour défendre ce qui compte. Je suis impatient de me rendre à Bruxelles en juillet prochain pour participer au sommet de l'OTAN de 2018. Encore une fois, c'est un honneur de recevoir le secrétaire général aujourd'hui à Ottawa et je vais maintenant lui céder la parole avant de passer aux questions. Je vous remercie. Jens.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Trudeau. Justin, it's great to be back in Ottawa and to meet with you. And as you said, NATO was established by the Washington Treaty 69 years ago today. So the 4th of April is an important date in the history of NATO. Since then, our alliance has been a guarantor of peace, providing security and preventing conflict, because North America and Europe stand together. Canada was a founding member of the alliance, and today Canada continues to make vital contributions to our shared security. Following Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea and aggressive actions in eastern Ukraine, NATO boosted its presence in the eastern part of our alliance. And today, Canada leads our multinational battle group in Latvia, your largest European deployment since the Cold War. When I visited the Canadian troops in Adasi with Defense Minister Sajjan last year, I was impressed by their dedication and by the fact that so many are serving so far from home to deter aggression and keep our allies safe. Canadian jets have also patrolled the Black Sea region to support Romania, and Canadian ships boost NATO's maritime presence from the North Sea to the Aegean Sea. I also warmly welcome the Canadian decision to rejoin our AWACS program. We have flown these surveillance aircraft on NATO missions for more than 30 years. And today, we use them to support the global coalition to defeat Daesh. Canada also makes important contributions to NATO partners. Your support for Ukraine helps boost its resilience. You are making a major financial contribution to the Afghan National Army Trust Fund. And just last month, I saw how your trainers help Iraqi officers and soldiers in keeping their country safe. Justin, both of us agree that gender equality is not just the right thing to do, it is also the smart thing to do. So I also appreciate Canada's work to keep gender issues high on the NATO agenda, and I'm working closely with Claire Hutchinson from Nova Scotia, my new Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security. And let me also commend Canada for investing more in defense. After years of decline, defense spending now is increasing, and I welcome your government's commitment to make further increases. Today, we had an excellent discussion on how to prepare for the upcoming summit in NATO and how to continue the adaptation of the alliance. Over the past few years, the world has become more unstable and more unpredictable, and NATO has responded with determination. At the summit in July, we will take the next steps to further strengthen our deterrence and defense, project stability and fight terrorism beyond our borders, and modernize our alliance for the challenges of the 21st century. Canada's contributions to the transatlantic bond and to international security remain essential, just as they have been since NATO was founded on this day in 1949. So once again, thank you so much, Justin, for hosting me and my delegation and for excellent discussions today. Thank you.
Happy to take
David
questions.
Aiken, Global News. Prime Minister, Secretary General. The only time NATO's Article 5 has ever been invoked, of course, was after 9/11, 2001. I'm wondering what the 9/11 equivalent would be for cyber attacks. We know that Russia, China, other foreign actors are engaged in cyber attacks in Canada, against Canadian targets, against NATO targets. And many citizens of our country and other countries wonder, what is NATO going to do to strike back and prevent cyber warfare originating from Russia? Prime Minister and Mr. Secretary General, if you both had a thought.
Canada has significantly been investing in upgrading our cyber capacities. We know that cyber attacks are a new realm of interference and pressure by various states on other states. It is something that we have had multiple discussions at the multilateral level, particularly around the NATO alliance. It will continue to be an area of concern as more and more of our citizens engage in ways that are linked to computer systems, whether it's our banks or our power grids or a broad range of issues. We know that an increasingly digitized world requires increasing our efforts to protect them. But when we talk about response to illegitimate actions by countries like Russia, I think there is a much more recent example that we can point to in which Canada and NATO allies and others responded extremely strongly to Russia's illegitimate attacks in Salisbury in the UK. The interference directly with citizens of another country, the actions by Russia in chemical warfare, or chemical weapons in any case, against civilians of another country are absolutely unacceptable, and that's why Canada took immediate and direct response in ejecting 4 Russian diplomats. And I might add as well that in the broad range of countries responding similarly, NATO itself ejected a number of Russian diplomats. So this is an example of the kind of response that NATO allies and others will have to incursions into areas of sovereignty.
NATO takes cyber threats very seriously because we have seen more and more cyber attacks. And cyber attacks can be as damaging as kinetic attacks. And that's the reason why actually NATO decided not so many years ago back in 2014 that cyber attacks can trigger Article 5, can trigger the response from the whole alliance. We know that at the end of the day that will be a political decision when to trigger Article 5. Our response will always be measured, defensive and proportionate. Therefore we will assess the attack and then decide how to respond. And it's not always obvious that given a cyber attack that we will respond in cyberspace. There are other ways to respond to cyber attacks. What we have done is that we are significantly increasing our ability to defend ourselves against cyber attacks, both the NATO networks, but also to help allies improve their cyber defenses. We help countries with technology, with exercises. We have a center of excellence where we share best practices, and we have a team of 200 cyber experts which are ready to be deployed in different NATO allied countries if needed to help them defend their cyber networks. So we are doing a lot to strengthen our ability to respond to cyber threats.
I want to talk a bit about the northern border with NATO. We know that Europe's eastern border has a lot of presence, NATO presence against Russia. But our northern border, Canada shares a border with Russia. Norway, of course, shares a border with Russia at the north. I know Norway has been pushing for a northern command to be established by NATO. And Prime Minister, I know there's been some discussion about whether Canada wants to see NATO assets in Canadian waters. Could I get you to talk about what and when we may expect a Northern Command and NATO activity in the north?
We had a very positive discussion on further engagement by NATO in the north. I think we recognize that the continued coordination, collaboration in the Arctic Ocean, particularly given the impacts of climate change and greater navigability in that area, we need to be aware of this new area we have to be more engaged in, and I very much look forward to working with NATO, as Canada has always been a strong NATO ally, will always continue to be, particularly in areas where there's a natural fit, like protecting our Arctic oceans.
J'ai été très content de pouvoir parler avec le secrétaire général sur l'enjeu de l'océan Arctique et la capacité du Canada de continuer à travailler avec l'OTAN pour assurer la protection de notre souveraineté collective et de la protection des eaux navigables dans l'Arctique. Je sais qu'il y a un nouveau modèle et une nouvelle approche qui s'annonce, et on en fera partie.
We used to say that in the high north we have low tensions, and I think we should continue to strive for avoiding an arms race and higher tensions in the high north. At the same time, we need, as allies and as NATO, to respond when we see increased Russian presence in the North Atlantic in the north, with more naval forces, submarines, ships, and so on. So therefore, part of the adaptation of NATO is that we are also increasing our naval capabilities, including in the high north. But we do that in a way which is proportionate and measured to continue to try to keep tensions low in the high north. NATO is planning to establish a new Atlantic command, which will be also responsible, of course, for the North Atlantic. I hope that the heads of state and government can take that decision at the summit in July. And that will strengthen our capacity to plan, to exercise reinforcements across the Atlantic. It will increase our maritime posture and be important, of course, for all NATO allies, because it strengthens the vital link between North America and Europe. The day after tomorrow, I will actually go to NORAD, which is a joint command for Canada and the United States. But that's also part of NATO. Because that's part of how NATO responds to the challenges we see in North America.
Michel Lamarche, TVA Nouvelle. Monsieur Trudeau, on a vu depuis vendredi 700 migrants franchir la frontière du Québec de façon irrégulière. Québec vous demande depuis quelques jours maintenant de payer la note parce que ça engendre des frais très importants. Pourquoi le gouvernement fédéral refuse de payer la facture?
D'abord, je suis très content que la table de travail continue son travail de coordonner entre les différents paliers de gouvernement la réponse à ces pressions de migrants irréguliers. Je peux rassurer les Canadiens que nous avons un système d'immigration et de migration qui demeure robuste et sécuritaire. Chaque personne qui arrive, que ce soit par avion ou que ce soit en traversant une frontière, de façon irrégulière, va passer par un processus d'examen de sécurité, examen du dossier, et nous n'allons qu'accepter les gens qui répondent aux exigences de notre système d'immigration. Le Canada demeure un pays ouvert qui comprend que d'accepter des immigrants, c'est une force et un bénéfice pour nos communautés, pour notre économie, mais que ça doit être fait selon les règles et c'est ce que nous allons toujours faire. Nous allons continuer de travailler avec nos partenaires provinciaux, municipaux et autres pour s'assurer que ça se passe de la bonne façon et on va continuer de discuter avec Québec là-dessus.
Ça fait maintenant 2 mois et demi qu'il y a des discussions qui ont été entreprises avec la Davy pour la construction de brise-glace. Il n'y a toujours pas de lueur d'annonce dans ce dossier. Qu'est-ce que c'est le problème?
Comme j'ai annoncé il y a plusieurs mois, nous sommes contents de pouvoir entamer des négociations avec la Davy pour des brise-glaces. On sait qu'on en a besoin pour notre garde côtière. On sait que la Davy a des options sur des brise-glaces qui pourraient être une solution, mais nous allons négocier directement avec Davy pour voir si il y a une solution possible pour les acheter, si on peut s'entendre. Comme nous savons tous, la Davy fait un travail exceptionnel. Les travailleurs de la Davy ont démontré avec l'Astérix et d'autres à quel point c'est du travail extraordinaire et de qualité. Et nous sommes très contents de pouvoir regarder si on peut continuer à travailler avec eux, mais ça prend des négociations pour s'assurer qu'on est en train de faire la bonne chose pour les forces, pour la garde côtière et pour les Canadiens.
M. Trudeau, Marie Vastel, Le Devoir. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de cette idée de M. Anthony Housefather de permettre la rémunération des mères porteuses? Je sais que vous n'avez pas vu le projet de loi, mais sur le principe.
Bien, je pense que c'est un enjeu qui est extrêmement important et qui touche énormément plusieurs familles, que ce soit des familles avec des problèmes de fertilité, que ce soit des couples de mariage gay, que ce soit différentes situations. Je pense que c'est une réflexion que nous devons avoir en tant que société et quand on verra le projet de loi, je sais qu'on va avoir une discussion sur les droits, sur les responsabilités que nous partageons en tant que société et chercher à voir comment nous pouvons avancer de façon raisonnable. C'est un enjeu qui va certainement susciter de grandes émotions et d'opinions fortes et en tant que gouvernement, nous allons respecter, nous allons écouter, nous allons essayer de trouver la meilleure façon d'aller de l'avant.
Mais comment vous faites pour réconcilier justement ce souhait d'avoir des enfants de couples homosexuels, par exemple, que vous évoquez, que M. Housefather évoque, et les préoccupations de groupes féministes, vous êtes vous-même un féministe, les préoccupations de ces groupes qui s'inquiètent de voir une instrumentalisation du corps de la femme et de permettre de louer un utérus?
C'est justement au cœur des discussions et des réflexions que nous devons avoir en tant que société. C'est pas une situation facile, c'est une situation complexe, mais c'est quelque chose sur lequel il va falloir qu'on se penche. Il va falloir évidemment qu'on écoute les différentes perspectives, qu'on apprenne des expériences des gens, qu'on regarde qu'est-ce qui est la meilleure solution pour nous en tant que société en ce moment. Ça va être un enjeu difficile mais important et je sais qu'on va avoir beaucoup de temps pour y réfléchir et pour en discuter.
Prime Minister, I'm Alf Johnson from VG Daily in Oslo. On the sanctions against Russia after what is imposed, the sanctions and the reactions, there might be a debate whether they are sufficient enough. And especially after General McMaster yesterday said that, quote, "We have failed to impose sufficient costs on Russia," unquote. Do you agree with General McMaster? Is there a need for heightening the sanctions? And the same question goes to Secretary General Stoltenberg.
Thank you. Canada has always stood with the international community on imposing sanctions on various actors, in this case Russia, for a series of illegitimate and illegal actions, whether it was the annexation of Crimea, its interference in the Donbass, the actions they've had more recently in Salisbury in the UK. There need to be clear consequences from the international community on Russia's continual desire to upset or cause trouble in the international order and international peace, stability, and governance. We are continuing to work with our partners and look at ways where we can continue to make sure that Russia understands that this is not in their interest, not in their citizens' interest, and not in the global interest to continue with these types of behaviors. We've recently passed Magnitsky legislation that will allow us to further target particular actors with sanctions. We will continue to reflect on the impact, on the efficiency of sanctions, and are always open to more discussions on what next we can do or what we need to do.
Russia has underestimated NATO's resolve and unity. As a direct response to their illegal annexation of Crimea and destabilizing efforts against Ukraine, we have implemented the biggest reinforcement of our collective defense since the end of the Cold War, including deploying combat-ready battle groups in the Baltic countries, one of them led by Canada. We have more forces, more ready forces, and we also have increased defense spending across Europe and Canada for the first time in many, many years. On top of that, we have suspended practical cooperation, and we saw after the Salisbury incident or attack that NATO allies and partners, in a coordinated way, decided to expel many diplomats from several NATO allied countries. If you add to that also NATO allies are part of economic sanctions, which has proven to be very resilient, I think it's obvious that Russia has underestimated the unity, the resolve, the strength of the response from NATO and NATO allies to their reckless behavior, which we have seen especially since Crimea, Ukraine, 2014, and what has happened since then. I would like to commend Canada for being a leader in the efforts to protect a rules-based order, to protect strong international institutions, and especially in times with more uncertainty, more unpredictability, we need strong institutions as the UN, but also as NATO, to try to prevent conflict and to diffuse tensions.
If I can ask a following question, is there anything in the preparations for the NATO summit this summer that could indicate that NATO countries are working on harsher sanctions than what we see today?
Well, it's not for NATO to decide on the economic sanctions. That's for the EU, for individual allies, and the US and so on to make decisions on the economic sanctions. But of course, we discuss also these issues in the NATO family, and we will just closely follow and assess the situation, and we will do what is needed. At the same time, we don't want a new Cold War. We don't want a new arms race. So we are focused on how can we respond in a firm, strong, predictable, but also measured and defensive way. Russia is there to stay. Russia is our neighbor, so we will continue to strive for a more constructive relationship with Russia.
Last question.
Prime Minister, Secretary General, thank you for taking our questions. Marie Brewster with CBC News. Secretary General, Russia conducted missile testing in the Baltics and apparently closed some airspace today. And I'm wondering how you view that in light of the meeting that took place at the White House yesterday, and how that squares with your stated intention of having eventually better relations with Russia.
Every nation, also Russia, has the right to exercise its forces. But we will, of course, follow Russia's exercises closely, and we stay vigilant, and we are also increasing the readiness of our forces, especially in the Baltic region, where we have deployed combat or battle troops already. What we see is that this takes place as part of a pattern of behavior of a more assertive Russia, which has invested heavily in new military equipment, modernized their forces, which are exercising more, including with nuclear forces, integrating exercises with nuclear capabilities, with conventional capabilities, and also actually have been willing to use military force against a neighbor, against Ukraine, and which provides support to the Assad regime in Syria. So this is part, and then it's responsible for cyber attacks and meddling in our national democratic processes. So this is part of a broader picture, and that's the picture, that's the pattern which NATO has already responded to, with higher readiness of our forces, with deployment in the eastern part of the alliance, with increased defense spending, and with more exercises, and also strengthening our cyber defenses.
And just as a follow-up, Prime Minister, you referenced the expulsion of Russian diplomats a little earlier, and in the statement from Global Affairs initially, they said that they are intelligence officers or individuals who have used their diplomatic status to undermine Canada's security or interfere in our democracy. Interfere in our democracy is a very strong language. What did they do precisely?
I think we all can remember the efforts by Russian propagandists to discredit our Minister of Foreign Affairs in various ways through social media and by sharing scurrilous stories about her. There are multiple ways in which Russia uses cyber, social media, propaganda to sway public opinion, to try and push a pro-Russia narrative. Certainly our troops in Latvia are currently experiencing a wave of interference and propaganda by Russia. This is a pattern that we have seen regularly, and our desire to stand firm with our allies in the UK and all around the world that yet another illegal and illegitimate act by Russia, this time in Salisbury, means that this was an important symbol of the kind of strength of response and unity that Canada has consistently shown, and that NATO allies are pushing back strongly against Russia. Je pense que nous nous souvenons tous des essais que la Russie a fait pour discréditer la ministre Chrystia Freeland en partageant des histoires fausses sur Internet à propos de sa famille. C'est un exemple parmi tant d'autres des efforts de la Russie d'influencer ou d'avoir un impact sur l'opinion publique. Pour moi, c'est tout à fait inacceptable que la Russie choisisse de se mêler dans l'opinion publique canadienne, et la réponse du Canada évidemment n'est pas liée à ça, est tout à fait liée à notre solidarité avec nos alliés par rapport à l'attaque à Salisbury, mais c'est un autre exemple parmi tellement des efforts de la Russie de déstabiliser et de jouer dans l'opinion publique des pays développés. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very much.